Hello everyone, I hope y'all have been staying safe with all that's been going on in the world this year. Before we start with today's topic, I've got a few things to communicate. First, as the violence escalates across the United States, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the bravery of those fighting to end police brutality and, more broadly, the structural oppression that our system was designed to support. The global pandemic already threw many people's false sense of security out the window, and though I cannot possibly have the darndest idea of what's awaiting us on the other side of all this turmoil, I deeply believe that we are at a time for change. It can be the good kind or the bad kind of change, as we see the president of the most militarized country toying with the idea of invoking the Insurrection Act. I'm in no position to tell anyone what to do. But whether you decide to participate and how, I ask that you stay safe. The state has the tools to follow you and suppress your actions, so make sure to have a network that may provide you with necessary advice and protection from the incoming crackdown. Have a plan of action. Discuss with the leaders of local organizations. To some of you, that may be a DSA or a Black Lives Matter chapter, or something else entirely. Regardless, make sure that you have people you trust around you at all times. Make sure to make preparations with legal aid, including setting up bail funds in case you or anyone you're involved with is taken into custody. I'm not an organizer, so surely there's many other important things I'm missing, but you get the idea. Whatever happens, be prepared for the worst. Hopefully, it won't come to that, but you never know, and if it does, you and yours will be ready. Please take care. The second thing is that if you've been following this channel, you're well aware that my most recent stuff is considerably longer than my initial stuff. I'm still trying to figure out what this channel is meant to look like, so there's gonna be some more trial and error until we get to that sweet spot. That said, I originally planned today's topic to fall on the lengthier side of things. But as I gathered more and more sources, I figured that there were way too many angles to cover in one sitting, and each one of them keeps developing deeper and deeper as time goes on. And there's just no way in heck to do it all together. Or I guess there are ways, but I am not doing that to myself or to you. I've been wanting to shift gears a bit and talk about how the pandemic has hit our criminal justice system. But then I got buried in the many ways this has been happening. And oh my gosh, there are so freaking many. The federal government is doing its own thing, and each state has had to come up with its own strategies. And then there's the different responses between jails and prisons, not to mention ICE and immigration detention. And how do we manage people convicted of weed possession differently from serial killers? And then there's the children in juvenile detention centers. Will someone please think of the children in juvenile detention centers? Except unironically this time, because we're not talking about these children nearly as much as we should, considering, that they are children serving time. Anyway, it took me well over a month to just catch up with all this crap, and then organizing everything into a coherent manner. No. Needless to say, I soon realized that I was biting so much more than I could possibly chew. So, instead of that unmanageable nightmare, I'll be releasing different episodes, trying to focus on the different and concrete topics revolving around this overarching issue, which is the pandemic in the justice system. I may call it COVID Chronicles. Throw some nice alliteration to distract me from the horrifying life in a biohazardous dystopia? Or something else? I don't know. We'll see. You already know, since you already read the title. I'm blabbering now. Let's get back on track. Lastly, I've been thinking of going back to my old videos and release shorter versions of the topics we've already covered. Maybe make them something like 5 minutes long. I probably won't be adding any new information since the point is to cut the excess and adding would sorta kinda defeat the purpose. I can do that easily with the videos on originalism and judicial review. I may have to release 2 or 3 parts for my video on the War on Terror, And I probably won't be touching the ones on Supreme Court cases for 2020, since those were more of a list than a substantive lesson in and of themselves. I don't know if I'll do that with this series that I'm working on presently. We'll see how that turns out first. I'll try to alternate these short summaries along with my new content so that the channel doesn't just become a rehashing of old stuff. Those at least should take much less time to get done, since most of the work is already over, and all I gotta do really is boil them down and record the shorter versions. Actually, you know what? Let's open the poll. Do you even care about this idea? Because if you don't, then I should probably just keep doing what I've been doing. But I don't know. I'm not you. So you tell me, do I do it or nah? Polls open. Let's have a clean election for a change. So, with all that out of the way, let's get to the matter at hand. The fact that our infuriatingly dehumanizing justice system is so unbearably incompetent that, on a good day, it serves as a cover for human rights abuses in the name of profit making, and, on a bad day, it becomes a hellscape of a turbo booster for a pandemic that our joke of a government was too negligent to contain and seems rather inclined to exacerbate for reasons beyond my mortal understanding. It's the money and the sociopathy of an elite class whose whole purpose on this earth is to suck every resource out of our dying bodies to sustain their decadent lifestyles, even if that means sacrificing Nana to the market gods. That's okay. That's alright. Nana had a good run, and if anyone should be sacrificed, it should be the literal criminals currently locked up in any of the over 7,000 confinement facilities across the country. Right? Wrong. And I can be understanding of anyone who would think this way while being unfamiliar with the realities of our prison industrial complex. But those who know these realities and still support this messed up system should honestly go screw themselves. As I cover the different points I want to get into with this series, I'll go over several reasons why forsaking the incarcerated is a horrible decision, not only for the individuals behind bars, but for our nation at large. This video will be more of an introduction, something quick to reference if you want a surface-level view of the subhuman conditions that our justice system has been left in as COVID-19 spreads across the nation. I will revisit the topics covered here in greater detail at a later date. For today, though, I'll just invoke some basic stuff like the fact that no other country on the entire planet locks up their people anywhere near the scale that we do, to the point where roughly 1 in 4 prisoners in existence are being confined either by our federal government or by any of our state governments, even though we only have about 4% of the world's population. And even though our current prison population is the lowest it's been in 20 years. As you've probably figured out, people in this patch of land are not any more criminal than people in all other patches of land. It's more so that our tough on crime attitude has gotten people incarcerated to an extent that is quite inconceivable by the standards of literally every other country. And there are many reasons for this, from the anti-crime craze inspired by the Willie Horton ads that won George H.W. Bush the presidency against the bleeding-heart liberal Michael Dukakis back in 1988, to the policies led by the multi-billion-dollar prison industry at all levels of government. In absolute terms, we've currently got over 2 million people in state custody, and because that number is way too big to mean anything to anyone, it translates to roughly 1 confined person for every 150 people in the country. For context, if we were to put our national population in average-sized movie theaters, about 1 or 2 people in each theater would be incarcerated. All of that's without even considering the 4.5 million people, give or take, who are not incarcerated but are still under some other form of state supervision like probation. And then we have the racial aspect of this whole catastrophe, given that our prison population is about 33% African American, although African Americans only make up about 12% of the national population, 23% Latinx, who make up 12% of the national population, and only 30% white, despite whites comprising 64% of the national population. This is all after a drop in racial inequalities, mind you. A couple of reasons for these disparities being good old racist policing, with people of color being arrested much more often than white for the exact same crimes, as well as the class side of things that disproportionately holds people of color in poverty and aggressively cracks down on poor people's lawbreaking while looking the other way when the mostly white rich commit crimes of their own, even though the latter impact our country much more significantly than the former. There are other factors to keep in mind, like all the wrongful or otherwise unjust convictions we see every day, such as life without parole for selling weed, or how the prison system has literally been used to house people with mental illness since our healthcare system can't be bothered to actually work. But the TLDR is that incarceration is a tool that the powerful wield for the purpose of the social and economic control of the masses. So, all things considered, I find it safe to say that the way incarceration is being run in our turf stinks hard, and the people our government has locked up probably deserve some slack, if not outright compassion, especially with the virus shattering the facade of righteousness shrouding so many other social institutions. Turns out, maybe we also misjudged the morality of our incarceration machine. Go figure! And now, on top of all that, it seems the gods were feeling like poopy buttholes and decided to release a new plague upon us. Now, there are many things to be said about how the pandemic is affecting the general public, and we shall cover that as well. But I do want to keep the focus on matters of crime and justice, so that's gonna be the bread and butter of this series. As we prepare to tackle this topic, I want you all to keep in mind that the worst of the pandemic hasn't even happened yet, and that even though our government monumentally botched its response to the first wave, they are committed to making the second wave even more dangerous than anything we've been through. And I am sure that you have seen the public reaction so far, with some demonstrations founded on legitimate economic struggles, and then a bunch of Karens, conspiracists, white supremacists, and any combination of the above loudly demanding that the right to keep infections rising be respected. So, if it is so difficult for the general public to keep its crap together as soon as minimal restrictions are set in place, I want you to take a minute to imagine the level of fear that must be spreading within the total institution that is our justice system, so overcrowded that something so seemingly simple to us in the outside as social distancing is virtually impossible to achieve in there. Plus, because prisons don't exist in some alternate plane of existence, so long as the disease persists within them, it'll continue spreading to the outside world, especially since there's no guarantee that people who already got the virus can't get it again. Which brings up the possibility of a vicious cycle of people getting sick in the outside and infecting those in the inside, and vice versa, without an end in sight. Compounding this gargantuan mess is the fact that our prison population is getting older and older. According to the Pew Charitable Trusts, from 1999 to 2016, the number of prisoners 55 years of age and older rose from 3% of the total prison population to 11%. And while state participation in this study varied, all states that provided information saw some increase in their share of older inmates. All this matters because, as is the case with any disease, older people are a high-risk category when it comes to COVID-19 prognosis. I'll note, however, that there's a bit of a disconnect here because the stats I have provided, the ones I could find without having to personally crunch the numbers for the federal and all 50 state governments myself, set the line at 55, whereas the CDC has distinctly focused on those who are 65 and older. To this, I say that it's not like COVID-19 is going to ask for people's IDs as it infects them. Remember that age is meant to serve as an indicator of bodily health, with older people, on average, being less resilient than younger folks. Other factors play a role when it comes to bodily health, especially the amount of stress that a person is put through and at what frequency. The literature actually indicates that the prison life makes people age faster than their peers in the outside. This bit of info is crucial when attempting to translate the risk of the virus, of which the discourse revolves nigh exclusively on how it affects the general public, to those under some form of incarceration. So, I'ma make the claim that being in prison almost certainly lowers the age threshold that we see being echoed in your regular coverage of the pandemic. I'm unaware of any studies critically looking at the ages of prisoners who have suffered from COVID-19 specifically, but I expect we'll see more of this in due time, and whenever that occurs, I'll be sure to let y'all know. Adding to all that is the repulsive levels of filth plaguing our confinement institutions. And that's not a figure of speech. These places are horribly kept. I'm talking broken or missing sinks and toilets, and bathrooms with no soap or paper towels. Hand sanitizer is often banned due to its alcohol content. There's been several reports of freaking mold growing off the walls. And to top it all off, an emphasis on fiscal conservatism has resulted in inmates being underfed, and outsourcing of food supplies to private corporations has led to rotten meals that had been nibbled on by rats, and even some instances of maggots in the food. For the extra protein, obviously. Couple this with a medical system that's often delayed or simply non-existent, and boom, perfect storm. Needless to say, this BS ain't helping strengthen the immune systems of those held captive by the state. But that's how things are at the moment. I'm gonna wrap it up now because I know that if I don't, I'll just keep going on endlessly. And I'd like to upload this before 2020 finally makes the world explode or whatever crap is reserved for the rest of this godforsaken year. I'm not really using a timetable here, especially since I don't even know what life is gonna look like 2 weeks from now. So if you wanna get notified of my next video, please remember to click the bell. Links to my Patreon and Ko-fi are in the description if you wanna spare a coin. But obviously the situation right now is unforgiving to everyone around here, so it's alright if you'd rather save that money instead for a rainy day. You can like and comment for free though, if you wanna give me a hand with the algorithm. Hopefully, I'll release my next piece soon enough, especially since I'm doing this multi-part format instead of a documentary-length film. Until then, stay safe, yo. And again, please take care. Goodbye.